There are certain periods in a woman's life where independence feels strong, empowering, almost like she can take on the world without needing anyone beside her. Then there are other moments where life shifts and the emotional weight feels different. Not because she is incapable of standing on her own, but because life naturally moves in phases, and each phase carries different emotional needs. In some of those phases, the presence of a man is not just a desire, it becomes something deeply felt on a psychological and practical level. This conversation is not about weakness or dependency. It is about understanding patterns that many people ignore or pretend do not exist. When you truly understand these stages, you begin to see women differently, not through assumptions, but through awareness. So instead of avoiding the truth or dressing it up to sound comfortable, we are going to look at it directly. We are going to break down the specific periods where this need becomes more visible, more intense, and more meaningful, in ways most people fail to recognize. The first stage begins in the early 20s, roughly between the ages of 20 and 25, a period that looks exciting and full of freedom on the outside, but feels uncertain and overwhelming on the inside. This is the phase where a woman is stepping into adulthood, exploring independence, meeting different kinds of people, and trying to figure out who she truly is. Everything feels new, from attention to relationships, and that can be both thrilling and confusing at the same time. At this stage, she is learning to separate what feels good in the moment from what actually adds value to her life. She is exposed to different forms of affection, different personalities, and different intentions, and not all of them are genuine. This is where emotional decisions are often made quickly, sometimes without fully understanding the long-term impact. What makes this period sensitive is not a lack of intelligence, but a lack of experience. She may believe she understands love, yet still struggle to distinguish between attention, attraction, and real emotional connection. At this point, the need for a man is not about basic survival or dependence. It is more about guidance, emotional grounding, and reassurance. Not just any man, but one who carries a sense of stability, maturity, and clear intention. A man who does not take advantage of her curiosity, does not manipulate her emotions, and does not confuse her further while she is still trying to understand herself. Because when that kind of presence is missing, she can easily fall into situations that feel right in the moment, but leave lasting consequences. During this stage, attention can feel like validation, and validation can quickly be mistaken for genuine love. She may give her time, energy, and emotions to someone who has no real plan or commitment, simply because the feeling is intense and new. These experiences can shape how she sees relationships going forward, sometimes creating patterns that are difficult to break later in life. That is why this phase is so delicate. The kind of man she encounters here can influence her confidence, her expectations, and the standards she carries into her future. As time passes, many women begin to reflect on the choices they made during those early years, and this is where a different kind of awareness starts to form. Experiences that once felt exciting or harmless begin to carry meaning, and she starts to recognize how certain decisions shaped her confidence, her trust, and even the way she approaches relationships. This reflection is not always easy, because it often comes with the realization that some moments could have been handled differently. It is during this stage of looking back that regret can quietly appear. Not always in a dramatic way, but in small thoughts that come and go, questions about what could have been if better decisions were made. She may realize that she gave too much to someone who gave too little, or stayed longer than she should have in situations that were not truly right for her. These realizations are not a sign of failure, but they show how powerful that early stage can be. The people she allowed into her life during that time, especially the wrong ones, may have influenced her self-worth and set patterns that take time to unlearn. The second stage begins in the late 20s and moves into the early 30s, a period where life starts to feel more serious and less experimental. The excitement of earlier years begins to settle, and reality becomes clearer. Priorities shift, decisions carry more weight, and there is a stronger awareness of time. What once felt endless now feels limited, and that alone changes how a woman approaches relationships and life choices. At this stage, external pressure often becomes more noticeable. Friends are getting married, starting families, building stable lives, and naturally, comparisons begin to happen. Family members may start asking questions, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, about her future plans. These voices, combined with her own internal thoughts, create a sense of urgency that was not present before. This is where the need for a man takes on a different meaning. It is no longer about curiosity or emotional exploration. It becomes about alignment, stability, and purpose. She is no longer looking for temporary feelings. She is thinking about long-term direction and building something that will last. At this stage, what she values begins to change in a very clear way. The things that once seemed exciting, like uncertainty, spontaneity, or emotional highs and lows, start to lose their appeal. She becomes more focused on consistency, reliability, and a sense of direction. A man who knows what he wants, who is steady in his actions, and who communicates with clarity, becomes far more attractive than someone who simply creates temporary excitement. She begins to understand that attraction alone cannot sustain a relationship, and that feelings without structure often lead nowhere. This awareness makes her more intentional with her time and energy. She starts to ask deeper questions, not just about how a man makes her feel, but about where the relationship is going and whether it aligns with her future. At this point, uncertainty becomes costly. Emotional games, mixed signals, and lack of commitment are no longer things she is willing to tolerate. She has learned, either through experience or observation, that time invested in the wrong person can delay the life she is trying to build. However, this stage can also come with its own challenges, especially if her earlier experiences were not positive. If she spent her early 20s investing in the wrong people, she may now carry emotional scars that affect how she connects with others. Trust may not come as easily, and even when she meets someone with good intentions, there can be hesitation. This is not because she wants to hold back, but because she has learned how easily things can go wrong when emotions are given too freely. At the same time, there can be a quiet feeling of being behind. Watching others settle into stable relationships or marriages can create pressure that is both internal and external. This can lead to moments where she questions her own journey, wondering if she made the right choices or if she lost time that cannot be regained. In some cases, this pressure can push her toward lowering her standards, choosing someone who offers security but not genuine connection. This is what makes this phase so sensitive. The desire to build something real is strong, but the fear of repeating past mistakes is equally present. At this point, the need for a man is no longer about filling an emotional gap or escaping loneliness. It becomes about building something meaningful and stable before more time passes. There is a stronger focus on partnership, on creating a life that has structure, direction, and shared goals. She begins to think long-term, not just about feelings, but about compatibility, values, and whether a man can truly stand beside her as she moves forward. This is where intentional choices matter the most. She becomes more selective, not out of pride, but out of understanding. She knows what it costs to invest in the wrong person, and she is less willing to take risks that could delay her progress. Every decision carries more weight, because she is now thinking about her future in a more practical way. There is also a deeper awareness of time, not in a panicked sense, but in a realistic one. She understands that building something meaningful takes effort, patience, and the right person, and she becomes more focused on finding that alignment rather than chasing temporary experiences. The third stage begins in the mid-30s and moves into the 40s, a period that is rarely discussed openly, but carries a deeper level of clarity and emotional awareness. By this time, a woman understands herself far better than she did before. She has seen different types of men, experienced different relationship patterns, and developed a sharper ability to recognize what is genuine and what is not. Games that once seemed confusing are now easy to spot, and her tolerance for inconsistency becomes very low. At this stage, the need for a man becomes more specific and more refined. It is no longer about experimenting or figuring things out. It is about finding peace, stability, and true partnership. She is not interested in temporary connections or empty promises because she understands the cost of wasted time. What she seeks is something that feels secure, calm, and real. If that kind of connection is missing, the feeling of loneliness can take on a different form. It is quieter, more reflective, and often tied to deeper questions about life choices and the direction she is heading. During this stage, decisions become more deliberate and less influenced by emotion alone. She is no longer willing to entertain uncertainty or invest in situations that lack clarity. If she notices inconsistency, hesitation, or a lack of direction, she is more likely to step away quickly rather than wait and hope for change. This is not about being harsh, it is about protecting her time and energy in a phase where both feel more valuable than ever. She understands that being with the wrong person can quietly block the right opportunities. A man who is not aligned with her goals can limit her growth, distract her from what truly matters, and prevent the kind of connection she is actually looking for. Because of this awareness, she may choose to remain single rather than settle for something that does not meet her standards. The real lesson across all these stages is simple but often overlooked. The need for a man changes with time, and understanding that shift helps you see relationships with more clarity rather than confusion.